Hey, and welcome to the Easton Book Festival. We have with us tonight Joyce Hinnenfeld and Lee Upton. But first, I'm going to thank a few of our sponsors, including WDIY, Start Strong PA, Lehigh Valley Poetry, Lafayette Humanities Center, and Pre-K for PA. So we have Joyce and Lee here, and they're going to do some readings for us and have a little bit of a discussion. Lee, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I'd be happy to, certainly. I'm going to read from something that is new. It's work in progress. It's from a novel called Tabitha, Get Up. It's about a woman who is a biographer, not a very successful biographer, unfortunately, but who is very ambitious. She lives in a small town. Her true friend, probably in the world, is her nephew who owns a bar at the end of the world. Let's see, just a brief note on the title, Tabitha Get Up. And a number of times in the novel, she needs to get up physically, but also, like all of us every day, she has to, in some ways, get up to be alert to the world. So I'm going to read you just a few portions of this. First, though, I want to thank you, Daryl. Thank Andy and Rebecca and all that Book and Puppet Company does for Lafayette, for the whole community, for readers all around and outside of the community, certainly, too. And I'm so delighted to be reading with Joyce. I've heard Joyce read before. She's spectacular. She has the most luminous prose. And so it's a real honor to have this chance to read with her. So first I'll start out with, this is the very opening of the novel, Tabitha Get Up. When I was 18 and made the mistake of getting married, my mother gave me the same oak hope chest that her own mother gave her, the size and shape of a coffin. 32 years later, I still own that chest and have never opened it. That hope chest makes me think of all those sad Irish folk tales about the bride who ran away after the wedding. Or so everyone thought, until decades later, the bride's body was discovered in the wooden chest where they play hide and seek, planning to pop out and surprise her husband. In all those stories are always scratch marks inside the lid of the chest. I'm shivering now just thinking about it. On my wedding day, after I learned that my mother was giving me her hope chest, something horrible nearly happened to me. I was standing on a balcony after the ceremony and someone bumped me from behind and I almost shot off into the shrubbery. This is what I must somehow remember now. All those many years ago, I held firm. I did not plummet. And now I must, and I can, write an email that conveys a tone of authority. There is no lid on my life, and I do not always have to claw and claw and claw to gain respect. Stumbling is not plummeting. I'm going to read another portion of the novel. The novel is, it's in portions. It's texts, voicemails, scenes, but one thing that I think is a lot of fun for me was writing the mother's voicemails. Tabitha's mother is about 80 years old. She's a really strong personality. This is a voicemail from Tabitha's mother. Tabitha, I have a question. What sort of outfit should I wear to Corinne's wedding? I know it's months away, but she already sent one of those hectoring save the date cards. Now I feel like I should make plans. At least I've already settled on a wedding gift, a 6-pack of my homemade candles, vanilla scented. I plan to sprinkle dried flowers in the wax, so save all your dead flowers for me, okay? The wedding is not until October, but I don't want to wear something that shouts autumn. Nothing too punkany or dark gray and red, nothing that shouts Thanksgiving turkey gobbler. Oh my God, what am I doing? I don't know why I'm asking you, of all people, what I should wear. I hope I'll never again see you in that atrocious yellow dress, the one you wore to the Pickwick charity ball when you had eye trouble and had to wear a patch. You looked like Big Bird's diabolical sister. And that navy blue outfit from the last time I saw you at Avery's. Everyone thought you looked like a crooked riverboat captain. Anyway, start saving your dead flowers. The way you are with flowers, you're worse than a funeral parlor. By the way, isn't this great? I found out how to send messages directly to voicemail. Your phone won't even ring. This way we can save time, no unnecessary blabbing. I'm going to read a little bit further into the novel. I should mention that I wrote this novel during quarantine. I started it in April, and I really wanted somehow, because so many crises were happening at once, to write something that gave at least me pleasure. And then of course, I'm stuck at home, so I allow her to go to bars and parties and all the things I couldn't do. But one thing she does eventually after a crisis is she goes to a therapist. Her therapist is named Irene, and this is a little portion about a therapy session, and they've met several times before this. This section is called Good Morning, Irene. Irene has reorganized her consulting room. As I enter, she's sitting on the couch where I normally sit. She gestures toward the office chair, her usual spot. I sit uneasily and then realize her chair confers such a sense of power that it's a miracle Irene ever listens to a word I say. Go ahead, she says. Tell me what's bothering you this week. We sit in silence. I encourage Irene to lie down on the couch if she'd like to, but no, she sits clutching a tissue, her legs under her. Finally, I tell her about a waking dream I'm having. A funny thing, lately while relaxing, my mind floods with images. It's probably nothing, I tell her, but in this waking dream or fantasy or whatever you want to call it, no need to call it anything, Tabitha. Well, okay, this is what happens. I see a strange woman and she opens her mouth and all this dirt flies out and circulates around my head. Irene says, eat my dust. My, that's what the message is. That's what someone wants to tell you. The hostile part of you is communicating with you. Oh. And then the scene changes and I'm working as a butcher with this huge carving knife. It's more like an axe, really. And in my fantasy, or whatever you want to call it, I cut off my own arm. Irene sighs. Think about it. A part of you is defending the rest of you. That part of you, that courageous part of you, is asking you to consider the question, what am I, chopped liver? And then I'm resting on a bench and beside me are all these birds. The birds are quacking. That means I'm a sitting duck, right? I made that one up, Irene, because if I told you I was beside some birds, I know you'd say I'm a sitting duck. Irene brings the tissue to her eyes. The fact that you thought you knew what I'd say and that out of all possible cliches, you chose the sitting duck reference. That fact suggests that you are indeed a sitting duck. The mind is a wonderful thing. Why do you think I made sure we changed seats today? Because your back is bothering you and you thought the couch would be more comfortable? No, try again. Because my back is bothering me and you thought I'd be more comfortable in your office chair, or because you wanted to show me that you occupy a position of power, or because you want to get a sense of what this chair looks like with a person in it, or because you want a change of view, or please stop. I did want you to have a change of view and a realization as well, a realization that I wanted you to arrive at independent of my prodding. That takes too long. True, Tabitha. Unfortunately true. I changed our seating positions because I want to make the point that where we are positioned in relation to another person is a matter of perception. In our personal relationships, we may allow others additional power, even though our own power should not be diminished in relation to theirs. For instance, consider any of the queens of England. I'd rather not. I admit they had such a bad time of it. Consider the most recent Queen of England. As a queen, attired in her bright colored dress suits, she is a recognizable figure, admired and loved by many. But put her on the sidewalk, pushing a shopping cart and wearing a funky old pantsuit, and what happens? We identify with her? No, or possibly. What I mean is that we participate in giving people power. I'm not referring to institutional power at the moment, although there's much to be said about that sphere in various abuses. I'm simply speaking interpersonally. So you're saying that I'm treating some people like the Queen of England when actually they're just bargain shoppers like myself. Exactly. Tabitha, I don't know how you ever got the idea that there's anything all that terribly, terribly, terribly much wrong with you. From therapy? I got that idea from therapy. The idea predates therapy, I'm afraid. I always tell my clients, walk into the light. You're a creature of light. Tabitha, you should be raging against the dying of the light. That sounds so familiar. Who said that? Dylan Thomas. Right, Dylan Thomas, Welsh and couldn't keep his pants on. That's all I remember about him, and that's enough for our purposes. I pops a gold-colored lozenge into her mouth and says, you have to realize, Tabitha, that the end of any relationship is like a death, even if the relationship happened a long time ago and the person is actually dead. Do you understand, Tabitha? I do. If the end of a relationship is a death, then it makes sense never to begin a relationship so no one has to die. My therapist is excellent, so excellent that I may never need to return. And the final portion I'll read is a little lunch portion. I've truncated a bit, shortened it a bit. Tabitha, you'll see, desperately cares about a certain person who she believes will never care about her. But she knows she has to open her life up to other people. So she actually goes on a date with a man who's been stalking her. The reason he's stalking her, I'm not going to go into. It's pretty complex. So here it goes, and this will be the final portion I'll read. I won't accept a dinner invitation from the silver-haired man who has stalked me at the end of the world. I do accept a lunch invitation just to be kind and not squeamish and somewhat more open to the accidents of life. We agreed to meet at Scandals, his choice. The restaurant's name strikes me as especially presumptuous. I accept the silver-haired man's recommendation of the wine, some rare red variety, and my head swims instantly after the third sip. I do, however, manage to listen to him. He says, if you ever come to my farm, you'll see how bright the moon can be there and the stars. Living in the countryside, the sound of the leaves in the trees, that sound greets me each night. I like to keep my windows open so I can hear the old oak. I picture a barn where someone's killed. He asks, do you ride horses? Never more than one at a time, I say. Is that a joke? He asks good-naturedly, leaning forward. It was just a way of speaking. I once did ride a horse and let it have its way with me. The man in silver smiles. They're sensitive animals. They feel your feelings. They want to please, as in a healthy relationship. My vow, I will never ever see the inside of this man's barn. I have cats, I say. Basically, they model what an unhealthy relationship should look like. It works for me. My macaroni and cheese cannot come soon enough. Like a vision, the waiter appears and places our loaded plates before us. Oh, I say after my first bite, this is the fanciest macaroni and cheese I have ever tasted, gourmet style with 7 cheeses. I didn't even know there were 7 cheeses. The silver-haired man waves a fork at me. Camembert, Feta, Gouda, Brie, Roquefort, Colby, Cheddar, Gorgonzola, Asiago. Do you think that impresses me? I ask, because it really does. You have an incredible speaking voice. The silver-haired man says, "Do you sing?" I tell him I don't sing and have never sung even as a child, especially as a child. "How sad," he says. This comment freezes the conversation. "If you can talk, you can sing," he says. Silence. He shows me a photograph of his deceased wife, and my heart brims with sympathy. Feeling numb, I'm tempted but don't dare bring up my deceased ex-husband, would sound callous and competitive. I tell them that I bet he has a nice singing voice. This unlocks him. Soon he's singing softly at the table. We're now the only customers, and I still want to die. He winks, pleased with himself, and licks his fingers. That does it. There are two human acts that are beyond my power to defend myself against. People who lick their fingers and Bob Dylan singing "Lay, Lady, Lay." I'm sorry, I recognize that Bob Dylan is purported to be a genius. Nevertheless, every time I hear him sing "Lay, Lady, Lay," with that invitation to lay across my big brass bed like a collie named Lady is being instructed, it becomes very hard not to run through the streets screaming. "I'll be back in a minute," I say. I hurry outside, bend over the sidewalk, do not vomit, make myself breathe. When I unfold, I picture the silver-haired man on his farm, a hobbyist paradise. He ties his horse to an old oak tree. On a hillside, one small sheep bleats with loneliness. Then I picture the silver-haired man untying his horse and galloping around his barn while oak leaves thrash, and I force myself to go back inside. "It's useless. I can't ever enter your barn," I want to tell this man, but it would be awful to say so, like branding a chicken. Even if delicately done, it would be cruel. Love, I think, is this man's crisis. His loneliness, it's like a phantom has been waiting, an awful loneliness, and I recognize it in him. Seeing it in him makes that need rise up in me too. All that yearning in his face, that's how I must look, although not with him. And it's like something has cracked open, something brittle that had encased me. Other people, they are our best mirrors. I hope this man with his shining silver hair finds someone wonderful to love. It just can't be me. I don't want to be the sort of person who needs so much to be loved and touched, but I am that sort of person once again after years and more than ever. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks. It's fabulous.
I'm getting there. I'm unmuting myself. All right, that was wonderful, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Joyce Hinnenfeld.
Thank you, Daryl. And thanks to Andy and everyone involved with the Easton Book Festival. It's great to be part of this. And Lee, it's too hard to follow you. Thank you for that reading and for making me laugh. I needed that laughter tonight. I'm going to read just portions of a short story that's in my collection, The Beauty of Their Youth, which was published in March, not at a particularly auspicious time. This is a story that I've hesitated to read from, but I think reading with Lee is making me a little bolder than I sometimes am, and I'm looking to, I can't match her humor and wit, and at the same time, incredible humanity that's always there in everything she writes. But this is a story that's rather odd, and I think it will work for a reading. I'm going to give it a shot. So the title of the story is Benedicta, and it has a subtitle, which is A Guide to the Artist's Resume. And the reason I say it's a little strange to read, it's really not told in a typical beginning, middle, end narrative fashion. And it's set up, at least initially, to be constructed around guidelines to constructing the resume, specifically the visual artist's resume. And it's meant to be humorous in some ways, but it's also about an artist sort of coming to terms with his career and his final aspiration. I think that's all I'll say. And again, just excerpts. So it's set around the time that I wrote it, which would be around 2010 or 2011. Benedicta, or A Guide to the Artist's Resume. Artist's statement. The painter Van Lloyd, discouraged about the prospect of revolution, has decided on his final subject. We are entering the final round of realism. This is his last chance to get it right. Revolution now has a new, distinctly female form. And now some instructions. Name, in bold or larger font. Choose a professional spelling of your name and stick with it. If you have the exact name as an artist who's already garnering attention, consider a variation. This might be frustrating, but it also might lessen confusion. List of names. Richard Reisman, 1978 to 1986. Richard Van Lloyd Reisman, 1986 to 1989. Richard Van Lloyd, 1989 to 1997. Dick Van Lloyd, 1997 to 2000. DVL, 2000 to 2001. Van Lloyd, 2001 to 2009. The painter Van Lloyd, 2009 to 2000 ? Benedicta, 2000 ? to ? Contact information. Preferred mailing address, phone numbers, work studio, home, fax, email address, website. If a gallery gives you a show or chooses to represent you, they will probably eliminate your address, phone numbers, etc. This is because they want potential buyers to contact them directly regarding any interest in your work. Good, fine. The painter Van Lloyd has never owned his own place. He has mainly lived and worked in borrowed garages and cheap rented rooms. This was, for a time, connected with his fame. Now he sleeps and works Monday through Friday in his first wife's ex-husband's weekend house. On the weekends, he trolls the streets of San Francisco looking for models. Young women today don't look like they did 30 years ago, which is a problem, nor do they smell like the girls of his past. These young women trail behind them the scents of their shampoos and creams, their various elixirs. Save for the sleek long hair on their scalps, they are hairless as newborn mice. They drink bottled water. Their edges are smoothed and leveled by pharmaceuticals so they can finally stop washing their hands. But honestly, though he has been accused on several occasions of never having advanced beyond the age of 20 himself, his interest in these girls is purely professional. He says this and means it, no winking. He is looking for someone even remotely close in her physical honesty, in her high seriousness, in her lack of self-consciousness, to his girlfriend, Benedicta, who has told him that after the birth of her child, after a year or so, now stretched to 2 years, of devoted care to this new being, we will see. Education, MFA, 1989, painting, Yale. BFA, 1986, studio art, UC Irvine. BA, 1984, philosophy, UC San Diego. More instructions. Short biography, born, year, city, state, city, country, work, live, city, state, or city, country. Note, the absence of such information suggests that an artist might be hiding something. Born, 1961, San Diego, California. Work, live, Stinson Beach and San Francisco, California, USA. But before this, there was San Diego, California, USA, where the painter Van Lloyd surfed and painted and read Freud, Nietzsche, quantum physics. Paintings here were mainly of friends, fellow surfers, and students, and were distinguished primarily by some skill with line and human form, plus an attitude of alienation and contempt conveyed on faces that were always cut off by the boundaries of the canvas. None of these paintings was sold, and none survives. Yale, New Haven, Connecticut, USA, graduate school. When his interest in realism, unnamed and unexamined as it might have been, quickly became, in the eyes of others and then his own, a sign of a quaint, West Coastish ingenuousness, immaturity, provinciality, he would come home from the pit crits at Yale to lonely, bleary-eyed Linda and screaming 4-month-old Peter, hunkered down in their freezing basement apartment with nothing left for either of them. What in God's name were they doing there? Who did he think he was kidding? An MFA from Yale? Right. He belonged on a beach with a surfboard. It was Linda, jealous already, though at this point her jealousy was groundless, who said to him, well, for God's sake, why don't you just use that surfer boy persona here? They might not like your work, but it's clear they all think you're gorgeous, some kind of Greek god beach boy. I've seen them at the bar. They all want you, the women and the men. She lifted her shirt and attached her screaming son's mouth to an angry red nipple. For a fleeting moment, he longed to draw her and his son, but he suppressed the desire to capture this sad and lovely tableau in front of him. Mother and son. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Too romantic, too much realism. They would laugh at him. Who was he trying to be, Norman Rockwell? And so he assumed a de Kooning-esque persona, the raving California Dutchman, blonde and tan and shirtless, and began to paint cartoonish breasts on slabs of concrete, the left breast always labeled perfervid, and the right sacerdotal. He had discovered that the emeritus professor who taught his first art history course at Irvine used one or both of these words in every article he published. And then he moved to New York, USA, and began working with women's underwear and shards of glass. Work which was deemed somehow Parisian, though he hardly knew Paris, having spent only 2 nights there in the summer of 1984 until he ran out of money and got back on a train with his Eurail pass and backpack and headed to his younger sister's student apartment in Amsterdam, where he spent his days sketching in Vondel Park until he had completely exhausted the sympathy and additional funds of his sister and her punk-inspired friends. And thus returned to California and went to art school, married his first wife, Linda, and fathered their son, Peter, dragged Linda and newborn Peter to New Haven, then installed them in a gritty Long Island City apartment in Queens, shared a studio with some other Yale MFAs in Williamsburg, and made disturbing, supposedly Parisian things out of cheap white underwear that he bought in packages of a dozen in Chinatown. In New York in 1990, to have chosen torn white lace underwear, to have used the cotton crotches as canvases for the tiniest landscapes done all in reds, was to be perceived as a reader of Foucault, a discipline and punish style liberator, a mod deconstructor. By the time years later, when, as Dick Van Lloyd, he displayed a tire sculpture resembling a labia and titled it, "Many who claim to have read Foucault were lying," the critical perception had shifted and he had become known not as a liberator, but as a hater of women. The artist might be hiding something. Well, yes, if the critical perception of his work was going to be less about the work than about his life, the divorce from Linda, the dalliances with European models, then perhaps it was time he hid. In Europe, behind some aviator sunglasses in some borrowed leather. If it's all artifice, then it's all artifice after all. The sculptor Dick Van Lloyd, heir to the conceptual artist Richard Van Lloyd, born of the never fully committed abstract expressionist Richard Van Lloyd Reisman. In Europe, as Dick Van Lloyd, he created rubber tire remnant constructions, the aesthetic of the American highway with undertones of NASCAR. But now what would he possibly have to hide? 2 ex-wives and at present a girlfriend in Bruges. His son Peter now in London, where he makes a comfortable living representing the tire remnant sculptures and sees his father begrudgingly twice a year. It is Peter who has suggested that he put together this artist's resume. Yes, in the past, he did carry on a 10-year flirtation with conceptual art that wasn't, in truth, very conceptual, blunter than that, in truth. After the red landscapes came his signature white underwear with lace, this time dirty and bloodied at the crotch, glued with pieces of broken beer bottles to slabs of cement. These sold, but he was too engaged in a protracted series of battles with Linda, who had taken Peter back to California with her, who found him lacking as both a husband and a father, who would have liked for him to come home once in a while for God's sake. At this point, to have seen any of that money. When they divorced, she moved to San Francisco and he went to Prague. In Prague, he reveled in his status as an outsider artist, which required that he hide his training along with his ex-wife and son, relics of another life, He dressed like a biker, torn denim and distressed leather, reeked always of cigarettes, claimed not to have finished high school in the US, and happily leered at women, retrieving vestiges of torn rubber from Czech highways, dodging all those wheezing Skodas like so many tiny lunging beetles proved difficult, which further enhanced his image. Dick Van Lloyd, the madman American, Brando of the roadway and the gallery, happily inhaling all those deadly fumes as he glue-gunned rubber to rubber. And now I'm going to skip over the rest of his time in Prague and his return to New York and his various solo exhibitions and group shows, more of the resume. Move on ahead to near the end, where he is developing his thoughts on art and ultimately his vision of what he believes will be his last great project. He has never hated Linda, even at their worst. His own mother, Patsy, was a sweet woman, pretty and shy, and yes, of course, when she was younger, Linda reminded him of her. Patsy had dreamed of being a singer. Music, however, jangled his father's nerves. The painter Van Lloyd was 18 when Patsy died of ovarian cancer. But speaking of women and the history of portraiture, let's consider Thomas Eakins. Now there was a portraitist, happy to get naked himself if that would help his model feel more at ease. Poor fellow, where in 19th century Philadelphia were the beautiful upper-class women who would take off all their clothes? Now, of course, that's not the problem. It's the alarming robot-like quality, the brutal sameness of those lean, sculpted bodies that could drive an artist mad. Ben Shahn said that Eakins loved, quote, the incidental beauty of things, but even more the actual way of things. Peter Van Lloyd has only recently discovered Ben Shahn's The Content of the Form. His reading now is as random and undisciplined as it was when he was 20, as are his teachers and his influences. For instance, no one should be guided in life by the trembling alcoholic proprietor of a store specializing in crystals in a beach town north of San Francisco. The painter Van Lloyd knows this, and yet he can't help himself. He listens to Fred, the crystal store guy, as they drink coffee at the diner on the beach every morning, and he somehow believes what Fred has to say. The revolution will come. It has its roots in ancient legends. This wisdom has preceded us by millennia. We will be nothing but spectators. Except he doesn't wish to be a spectator. And now he believes the revolution will come when we understand, at last, this one pure instance of beauty. A woman's legs parted, her cervix widened beyond recognition for the passage of a human head. The moment and the sight of a woman's body that we have all learned instead to fear and, yes, even loathe. We are in dire need of revolution. The birth of Benedicta's child has taught him this, but he can't simply wait for it to come, doesn't trust that what Fred is seeing there in the bottom of his drained coffee mug is what he, the painter Van Lloyd, wishes to see, which would involve perhaps his mother singing, Linda swimming at Mission Beach when they were teenagers, Benedicta crowning, which would have more in common maybe with Van Eyck, with his miniature illumination for the Turin Book of Hours, the birth of St. John the Baptist, women, pets, all those domestic details, a clean bed, everybody ready and waiting, and not a man in sight. Because if, in fact, he hates anyone, most honest appraisers of his work and his life would have to agree that it's men. What he envisions is an altarpiece for a 21st century church of the body, a series of smaller panels, then images of Benedicta walking, Benedicta dancing, Benedicta sleeping. It's for these images that he needs models, though he never finds any. He's really just passing the time on those weekend walks through San Francisco after he's walked Anthony's terriers and watered his plants, passing the time until he can return to Anthony's weekend house, to the garage where he paints, walking the streets and reliving the day he met Benedicta in Amsterdam, tottering in her silly heels and short skirt, staring into windows, eating a sandwich and not at all interested in him. She was tall and so aloof, and she smiled at him and rolled her eyes when he asked if he was correct in assuming that she was pregnant, and also perhaps an artist. Neither perfervid nor sacerdotal. She reminded him of something about his younger self, his much younger self. free Yale. If there are young women like her on the streets of San Francisco, he cannot see them. Realism in a ridiculous age is revolutionary. A mother giving birth, a woman of indeterminate race, in need of no one, Benedicta la belle Hollandaise. Call it a mother obsession, call it regret, but understand that he intends for this work to be as free of his own psychology as it can possibly be. Form equaling content, his own Saint Benedicta, her body and her child, the actual way of things, signed by her. Each weekday morning after toast and coffee with Fred and a walk on the gray rock-strewn beach, the painter Van Lloyd uses Anthony's computer to send one email message to Benedicta in Bruges. In this message, he reports on the progress he has made in his work, then asks if he might one day join her and her child, a daughter, bringing along his canvas for her appraisal and perhaps her signature. And each night, before he goes to sleep, he finds the same reply from Benedicta. Keep painting, she writes, then, and we will see. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joyce. That was fabulous.
Thank you.
So, did we want to have some conversation about maybe like writing process or something along that lines?
Sure. I just want to congratulate you, Joyce. That is such a beautiful story, and it's like a novel. It has the kind of depth and resonance of a novel. There's so many parts coming together, and it's a really daring as well too. So you know, could you tell us a little bit about how you created the story?
Yeah, you know, it's been a while. I do recall that it was a story that felt like, and this never happens to me, you know, people will say, oh, it wrote itself. I just sat down and it came out, and I hate it when people do that because I don't really ever believe it, you know, but, and this didn't write itself, but I felt distinctly aware that I had no idea where it was coming from. I do remember that, you know, that I don't know who this character is. I was very interested. I think that one impetus for it, and Lee, you might relate to this, I don't know. You know, I think I was at that point sort of grousing a lot about the way I felt that women writers were always asked if their work was autobiographical, you know, or the assumption was always that a woman's work was autobiographical. And I knew a lot of women writers who were upset about this and felt like, you know, nobody ever asks a man that, or they, you know, like it doesn't matter if it's autobiographical or something, if it's a male writer's work. And so that was circulating in my head. And then I think I did start reading some things about, I was reading Ben Shahn. I don't know why. I was reading these things about artists and Thomas Eakins and portraiture. I don't recall why. I think I had ideas about an essay at that point. And something about this notion of the resume and the autobiography and how that pertains to the work or relates to the work started to really matter to me. And then I think I just decided I'm going to create this really rogue renegade character, male character, who's everything that a woman doesn't get to be. But then I'm going to have him reach this sense of the only important subject being, you know, a woman giving birth. I don't know. It was a weird confluence of things, I think. And yeah, not my usual process. So thank you. Thanks, Lee. Can I ask a question of you now, since can we just kind of ask each other questions? Is that cool? Okay. Well, I love everything I've heard you read from this novel. And I'm fascinated by Tabitha, but the therapist scene, oh my goodness. That captures so much. And does the therapist have more? I hope there are more scenes with the therapist, because I love her as a character. I love the rage and anger between the two of them. that strikes me as probably pretty unexplored, and that just seems apt and funny, but also sad. Is Tabitha, am I right in thinking that Tabitha is a deeply funny but also a deeply sad character?
She's so lonely. It's really sad. I was reading an interview with the novelist Hilary Mantel. I believe it was Hilary Mantel who said that at a certain part of a writer's life that you inevitably start writing about death. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I had about 300 pages of the novel at that time. And I thought, oh, I wonder how many references there are to death. So I did a little search of death, dying, and dead. And out of 300 pages, there were 153 times one of those words appeared. It was really, I think, a novel too that the therapist wasn't in the first version at all that I sent to my agent. And my agent was wonderful. And she let me know we needed to know much more about the character. And so by then, I had also started a sequel. And the sequel, well, I'd finished a sequel pretty quickly. Writing for me isn't quick, but for some reason, when I got this voice, I really missed her after I finished what I thought was the novel. So I wrote a sequel, and then the sequel helped me figure out what was impeding her. And in the sequel, I gave her a therapist. And so what I did was I imported into the first version the therapist. The date is imported into the first version. I even think that some of the, if I recall, I've done so many versions that, some of the mother was imported as well too. It really fascinates me that your story, which I just love, and one thing I love about you as a writer, Joyce, is how varied each of your stories are. But your story is like the portrait of an artist's life. It's not only the individual artist, but the artist in relationship. And it occurs to me that it's really nice for so many reasons to be reading with you, but in this Tabitha novel, she's a biographer, and so she's continually writing about people's lives or trying to write about their lives. Something else I want to mention too, that it's as if your character, this painter, continually has to find a new identity or a new way to be in the world, or somehow has to come to his revelations. And just briefly, the novel's called Tabitha, Get Up. And the funny thing was that I got that title because, after I wrote the first version, I thought, well, where does the name Tabitha come from? I mean, I should have asked myself that earlier. I'd done an etymology, I think it's ocelot or antelope, and in Greek, it's Dorcas. It's a really interesting name, but I thought, well, it must come in literature. It sounds like a biblical name. So I went online and I looked at Tabitha in the Bible, and there are various versions in English, but a number of the versions say Tabitha, arise. Other versions say Tabitha, get up. It's so true to this novel, bizarrely, the biblical character, because we see Tabitha as a dead woman first, continuing the death theme, and Peter raises her from the dead. He says, Tabitha, get up. Tabitha arises, and we never hear of her again. So that's it. That's it. Tabitha, get up. And, in the novel, it's so interesting what you're doing, because my character in the novel is trying to write about other people's lives because she cannot create her own life yet, Right. So, no, it was really, really fun to hear you move through this life and to see how daring the story is.
Well, it's an interesting question, the degree to which we as writers and the characters we create want to examine our own lives, our interior lives, or would prefer not to, you know? And so it seems like that's, you are exploring that with Tabitha. Like she might be resistant to, but she seems appropriately resistant to, I mean, I think part of why I really love the scene with the therapist is that she expresses so much of what I feel, you know, which is this is absurd. This whole thing began from an absurd premise, which is you're going to see what happens if I sit in your chair and I'm not going to fall for it. You know, I love that she seems stubbornly unwilling. And I feel like I'm very interested in characters who don't want to settle into the expected narrative, right? So that's true of the painter Van Lloyd in this story. He keeps remaking himself. And yeah, everything is a new revelation. He's not very effectively processing his feelings about women, though he thinks he is. I'm intrigued by the idea that a character could defy this idea that the way to get up, the way to rise and find happiness is to, I don't know, listen to your therapist, right? You know, conform in some. She seems like a nonconformist to me. I don't want to make you tell us what's going to happen, but something tells me that her way of getting up will not be, I don't know, embracing what, probably it won't be embracing what her mother wants from her. Based on her mother's message. The mother is a great character as well, just based on that voicemail message. But there are all these people telling our characters, and you know, I'm more than willing to think that I'm getting to be of an age where I feel like I'm angry about all the things I did because people told me to. And so now I want to give that to my characters. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah. I wonder, you know, I've never heard how you started writing. Did you write as a child? Did you write later? What?
Yeah, well, I didn't really. I mean, I may have, but I don't have I've always felt like almost sorry that I don't have that version, that story to tell, because so many writers do. I think, you know, Joyce Carol Oates still has the first little book she, you know, wrote. And a lot of my friends who write have these accounts of, you know, mysteries they wrote when they were children. And I didn't, in my memory, do that. I really think I didn't. I wrote some things in high school, but I remember feeling like I felt like an imposter, you know, like it wasn't me somehow. But I felt like an imposter in most ways in high school. So I think until I went to college, until I left home, until I felt a little bit freer, it didn't strike me as something I could do. So yeah, it was later for me. I mean, I got interested in writing in college. It still took a number of years after that for me to be able to own the fact that I wanted to be a writer. Mm-hmm. But did you start young? I feel like you did.
Yeah.
And you've never stopped. You've been writing every waking moment ever since.
I was, you know, I think I started early because it was an area I could control. You know, I was, I had terrible eyesight as a child, but no one knew it. And so I couldn't see the blackboard, but I could see what was in front of me, right? Like this. So I read and I read and I read and I read, and I just assumed when I didn't understand things, like how could people read the clock? I didn't understand. It's because it's far away, you know. And so I you know, I remember going to school. I didn't even know the alphabet when I went to school. I remember hearing the other kids singing the alphabet and thinking, oh, where have I landed? But then I, you know, soon learned and all. So it has really been just so important to me throughout my life to be able to write. And I guess I never thought I would publish. I never thought it would be possible, but I just kept on and on and on. But I remember in high school years, I stopped for a while. You know, when you're a high school kid, you know, it's like, hormones.
Yeah.
You can't do anything, it's just like, I have lists of dates or whatever, boy, am I going to get a friendship ring? I mean, it's very innocent back in that world. But then I went to a poetry festival in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the poet Robert Bly talked to me. So I had to catch the bus, and he said, if anyone wants to talk to me, I'll be out by that tree out there. So, and I knew I had to catch the bus. I had to get home. How am I going to get home? But I ran out there and I showed him my poems, and he said, these could be so much worse. And that made me so happy. It's like, these could be so much worse. Gosh, these could be so much worse. I mean, why not? That is like a vote of confidence. And could not stop from then.
That was it. You were blessed. You were told to go forward.
Yeah.
Carry on. Yes. Didn't you work as a journalist then when you were in college? Yeah.
Paid my way through college, and I write. I've put together another collection of short stories, and I write a lot about actors lately. And in fact, in Tabitha, one of the biographies she's working on is of an actor, really handsome actor. So handsome, his face is on the side of buses. But yeah, I used to, for the Lansing State Journal in Michigan, that's how I got through college. I got paid for each piece I wrote. And so I got to meet all sorts of people. Got to meet Frank Sinatra Jr.
Wow.
Wolfman Jack.
Wolfman Jack. I thought about him for a while.
I loved them all, and I have such admiration for actors. I can't tell you. I was just a gawk at them, and so I've written a bit about actors, and they just amaze me.
Yeah.
Their memories alone, Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And you've written beautiful essays, which I feel like I want more people to read your essays. I mean, also criticism. I mean, you have a very expansive oeuvre, but I want to. I think I've told you. I want to say again that your essays were so important to me. That I'm blanking on the name of the most recent book of essays, but I loved it so much, and I think I read that when my daughter was pretty young, and it just made me feel like I had a brain again. Yeah, it's because they're very smart and they're very funny. Yeah.
I'm so deeply indebted to you for your novels, your short stories, and so much you've done. You've been so generous to so many writers too. You have a beautiful way of reading also, and that story just is incredible, and it's searing. It's got a violence in it, and it's also just so wide ranging too. The breadth of imagination in your work is really stunning. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
This has been a real joy, and I really.
Same. I could do this with you anytime. I would do it with you anytime, any place, and we can have a cup of tea or not. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have cups of tea when we do this. But,
that'd be great.
No, Lee has been very welcoming to all writers in the Valley. She has been here maybe the longest of those of us who are hanging around now, but I almost match you, I think. And yeah, you've created such a welcoming world. I'm sure they miss you at Lafayette, but you like retirement, right?
I love my colleagues, I love my students, but I am forever grateful to I'm still in contact with everyone. Thank God they haven't exiled me, and I still am in contact with some students. But it's been a dream too to have the time, to write. Yeah. Well, Daryl, thank you so much for this, and Book and Puppet and Eastern Book Festival. It's been a joy.
Yes, thank you both for coming out and hanging out with us for a little while here.
Thank you. It was great fun. It's good to be able to talk about books, to talk about writing, keep focused on that. We have so many things to distract us right now, and this is a good and stabilizing thing to come back to. So thank you.
And that's what the Easton Book Festival is all about. And thank you for everybody who has tuned in to watch Joyce and Lee and hear their readings. And I hope everybody has a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.